Welcome, everybody. Hello, and thank you so much for being here. My name is Dial Grunga, and I am flying solo again today. This is Spirit Matters, your daily Bhakti Center podcast, and my co-hosts Kishore and Achyuta Gopi have been out for the last couple days. Achyuta Gopi will be back tomorrow. She was traveling for a Kirtan festival in Utah, and so she's been traveling, and she'll be back tomorrow. And Kishore's been on vacation this week. So it's just been a little bit of me, a whole lot of me, really. But I'm happy to be with you, coming in live from the Bhakti Center with our studio audience here, tuning in on Zoom and wherever you're tuning in from. I'm just want to let you know I'm really, really glad that you're here and that you're tuning in, finding time from your day. It's so hard. Our attention is being pulled in so many different places all at once on the regular. Anybody ever have that experience? Our beautiful little Anna is there on the screen with her daughter, and her attention being pulled in one way or the other. And so, oh, there she is. Yeah, we're talking about you, sweetie. Um, she she's fighting for attention, yet she's making the time to come here and be here and to listen and to tune in to something that's important to her. Um, or even if we don't want to, whether it's just constant. I mean, a, a, companies and agencies have more access to us than ever. And that's kind of how the world has been built, whether it's through our phones or through our TVs or through our computers or through wherever it may be. There's constantly people vying for your attention, and our attention is so short these days. They have the used to be the 60-second ad, and the 30-minute ad, and then it was the 15-second ad, then it's the 6-second ad, and it's a 3-second ad. Like, if you can't get somebody's attention in 3 seconds or less and convince them why they need to stop and look at what you're showing them, like, you've already lost them. We're moving on. And so for us to kind of take that time just to be here and to invest a little bit in my spiritual recentering, that's what we're here for. Spiritual recentering ourselves, just like reminders. One of my favorite quotes is the idea that Samuel Douglas, I believe it's Samuel Douglas. Sometimes I would say Samuel Douglas. One time I said Samuel Jackson, and I realized that's the actor. But it's Samuel Douglas, I believe, who said that people need to be reminded more than they need to be instructed. So these are simple spiritual truths that we remind ourselves of on a regular basis, so that it imprints deep into the mind. Because that's how advertising works. It's just they tell you something over and over and over and over again. And all of a sudden you're like, I think I do need to save 15% or more in my car insurance. I think I do need that, because it gets ingrained in our consciousness. And so the messages that we hear repeatedly, it's not that, okay, now I know better. It's like, no, I need to know better, and I want it to become part of who I am and sink into this level of realization. So we come online and we share with each other every day a little spiritual truth, just a little nugget, just a little short and sweet, something to take with us. And I was asking our friends here that are here live, and we have a live Zoom chat. If you want to get on our Zoom chat, just write to us at info@bhakticenter.org. We can help get you connected to our live Zoom room. And I was wanting to know what people are going through, what are the things that come up. And the number of things that came up was grief, handling grief, how to handle grief in a spiritual manner, which is an interesting topic because sometimes we think that we have all the spiritual tools, therefore I shouldn't be bothered by anything anymore, right? I had this experience. It's like, I've been meditating for so long, or I've been reading so much, I should know better. Why does this still bother me? Why am I still agitated by this? Why is it still affecting me? What does it mean to be human on a spiritual path? To allow ourselves human emotions and to move through processes of grief, where, yes, I understand the spiritual principles. We're all eternal souls. I'm not my body. And at the same time, what does it mean for me to have human emotions? So handling grief. The other topic was releasing expectation of acceptance from our parents. I need my parents to accept me, which is a type of grief, actually. Sometimes letting go of the idea of certain relationships is a loss. And we sometimes need to grieve that loss in terms of grieving a childhood, grieving the death of a relationship, the death of an idea of a certain relationship. And so sometimes, because we don't give ourselves the space to recognize what we wanted or thought was, or maybe once was but no longer is, accepting that it's no longer the case, or maybe never was, and then allowing ourselves the space to grieve. And so it's, stopping accepting. How do I stop expecting acceptance from my parents? How do I let go of the idea of who I think my parents should be? You know, how do I let go of that? And maybe there's a little bit of grieving that's included within that. And then there was distinguishing reality from illusion. So all those things were mentioned, and I was trying to pick one. And then Sydney said, put them all together. And then Dana was like, yeah, they definitely can go together. And everyone's like, that's easy. Just string them all together. It's easy. And I was like, okay, let me figure out how to do this. And so um, there is, I believe, spiritual thread that ties a number of these things together. And I just want to start with the idea of grief first. Um, and initially, I want to just read. We've been reading from the Journey Within, or these two sections that go back to back on page 143 and page 144. So on page 143, there's this section called Daily Challenges with Friends and Family and in the Workplace. And the section right after that is how to support a healthy spiritual community. So it's acknowledging this idea that even when we're in spiritual life, relationships can be tremendously challenging at times. Why? Because we have egos. And ego doesn't necessarily have to be defined as pride. Sometimes we say, oh, they have a lot of ego. It means that they're really, really proud. Ego defined in Vedic philosophy and in the yoga tradition simply refers to believing that I'm something which I'm not. Believing that I'm something which I'm not. And then investing a whole lot of material, emotional, physical, mental energy into that identity. And then naturally, when that identity gets threatened, we feel threatened. I'm doing this 360 review right now at the Bhakti Center. My role here at the Bhakti Center. Oh, my voice is really low. Can you guys hear me okay? Is this better? So sorry. Okay, this is better. My apologies. I'm doing this 360 review right now at the Bhakti Center. My role here is I'm an executive director. It's my role. And one of the ways in which I want to grow, and that we want anybody in any of our positions here to grow in the organization, is to give and receive feedback, that you need in order to get better in your role. But it's not easy to receive feedback. It's really not easy to receive feedback. It's easy to give feedback. It's easy to tell people it's easy. It's not always easy to give feedback because sometimes we're not comfortable talking to people directly, but it's easy to notice the things that other people need to work on. That's easy. And so what this 360 review looks like is we selected like 10 or 12 people. We contracted a neutral third party, so somebody from outside of our staff and our community and organization, to come in and interview like 10 to 12 people that I work closely with, either on our leadership team or that serve under me or alongside me or serve above me, or just community members that observe my work. And they conducted individual separate interviews with each and every one of them, just to evaluate how I'm doing in my role. What are things that are going well? What are the things that they appreciate? And what are the things that I'm struggling with or need to improve on? And they gathered all of that information. They conducted those interviews over the course of a couple weeks. They gathered all of it into a report, and then they shared it with me. And we're meeting today actually to discuss, how it went, what's the information, not find solutions immediately, but just like understand what's there. And all the things that are going well and all the things I need to work on. And immediately my mind went to like, what do people have to say about me? What are people noticing about me? What are all the wrong assumptions they have about who I am? And what are the counter arguments I need to make in order for them to better understand my intentions and that I'm not as bad as they think I am? But it's painful. It's hard. It was actually like, it took me like a day of just processing like, okay, like these are the things I need to work on. And as I was reflecting in my role, I was thinking, okay, it's one thing if you are like a sports athlete and somebody's watching your game and noticing, okay, like here's how your swing can be a little bit better, or you got to widen your stance, or I just saw the movie not too long ago, King Richard, which is about the Williams sisters, Serena and Venus Williams, and like how dedicated they were to the game of tennis and how eager they were to get like a coach and a teacher to show them about like widening their stance or holding their stance or this or that. Because it's easy to separate your performance from who you are sometimes in certain settings. It's like, yeah, I want to know if my stance is a little too narrow or wide, or I want to know if I can adjust my swing in a certain way. Or if, let's say, you're a computer coder or an engineer and somebody's giving you feedback about like your technique, about how to code better, et cetera. It's a further step removed from who you are. But when you're in a leadership position or when you're managing people, and people kind of mention about how maybe you're indecisive or you're not clear with things, or you try to be too nice and you're not clear enough, or you spend too much time talking about something, like, or whatever it may be, it's a lot harder to not take that personally. Um, and I was thinking that because you think that's who I am. But the reflection I was moving through with it was that I have to approach it in the same way. I have to approach it in the same way, that my performance or the way I act, that's not me. There's a separation between me and the way that the role that I perform and my function in interactions with other people. And when I'm receiving feedback, how can I separate it and treat it as if I'm just giving feedback on almost something outside of myself? Because I am not the identities I have in the material world. I am not the executive director of a nonprofit organization. I am not a community leader on the Lower East Side of Manhattan. I am not a yoga teacher, etc. That's the role I'm playing in this world, but it's not who I am really. And this idea of distinguishing reality from illusion is that, first and foremost, separating ourselves from the roles that we play. And ego is simply that process of addressing ego, removing false ego, is identifying all the ways that we identify with our roles, the things that we're not, and being able to have a more healthy relationship with those things so that we don't become so defensive when other people aren't. Because what is conflict? Conflict is when we have a disagreement about our ego identities, who I think I am and who I want, how I want you to see me, and how I see you and how you want me to see you. And when we look at that, like in terms of, you mentioned like parents, there's an ego identity of who I think I am, who I think you're supposed to be, and how I want you to see me. And none of it has anything to do with who I am on a spiritual level. It's all revolving around my material identities. And so the idea of approaching ego and saying that we all have ego, it's not a dig. It's not something to get defensive about. It's something to actually notice, oh my God, like that's really great. That's great information for me to know. Because otherwise, not knowing that, I'm just going to dig myself further into a hole of suffering. And when we identify these ego, the word for ego in Sanskrit literally is ahamkar, which means I am the doer. I am the role that I play. Um, and shedding ego involves sometimes a feeling of death. I mean, that's ultimately why death itself, the like physical death of the body, is so scary, because it's the ultimate ego rejection. You know, you literally are being, your soul is being pushed out of every single identity you've captured in this world, of being a mother, of being a wife, of being a business person, of being wealthy, of being funny, of being part of a family, part of a community, part of a nation, part of a race, part of a whatever it may be. Death is the ultimate rejection of ego. But along the way in this life, we don't have to wait for the physical death to start shedding layers of ego. Um, and that involves allowing ourselves sometimes the space to grieve and let it go. Because otherwise, what happens is that we might externally let something go, but internally we're still holding on very deeply. And there's this beautiful section in the Bhagavad Purana, the Srimad Bhagavatam, where the Bhagavatam takes place. Um, in the first canto, one of the first books, it opens up in a scene where it's post, it's almost kind of like post-apocalyptic war, post this like devastating war where large amounts of people were killed. There was a fratricidal civil war that's detailed in the Mahabharata, and the war symbolizes sort of like the fight of righteousness over evil, um, uh, and overcoming oppression, and establishing righteous rulership. And so this kind of war sim, and at the end of it, kind of righteousness prevails, and sort of these spiritual um, kind of values and principles are able to be established as a result of the outcome of this war. Even the war itself was such a horrible, horrible, heinous activity. In order to overcome oppression, it was forced upon people. And there's this beautiful section where the Pandavas, who are the sort of the victors of this place, are not feeling like victors at all. They're feeling tremendously despondent. And Arjuna specifically, who was spoken the Bhagavad Gita to, like Arjuna at the onset of this war, the whole first chapter of the Bhagavad Gita is this tremendous feeling of um, anxiety, of doubt, of concern that I don't want to go through with this. There's nothing good that's going to come out of this. I don't want to go through with this. And Krishna speaks the song, it's called the Song of God, the Bhagavad Gita, about how to navigate difficult situations from a spiritual mindset. And he starts with this idea of distinguishing reality from illusion, the soul from the body, the temporary from the eternal, the false ego from the true ego. And with that information, we take that and use it to navigate through our lives with maturity and with thoughtfulness and with a higher perspective. And still having that tremendous spiritual perspective at the end of it. There's these two verses in the Bhagavatam that's post this war. It says, thereafter the Pandavas, which is Arjuna's brother, desiring to deliver water to the dead relatives who had desired it, meaning that there's ritual, there's mourning, there's like an honoring of past relatives. They went to the Ganges, which is a sacred river, with Draupadi. Having lamented over them and sufficiently offered Ganges water, they bathed in the Ganges, whose water is sanctified due to being mixed with the dust of the lotus feet of the Lord. And it's a small little verse, and it's easy to kind of run past it, but it specifically mentions having lamented over them, specifically. Vilapya is a Sanskrit word, I'm looking here in the word for word, is that having allowed themselves the space to physically grieve and mourn what had been lost before moving on. It's like you got everything you want. You won the battle. Like you're victorious. Like you overcome the oppression. Like evil has been dispelled, and you're able to move on to a brighter future. Yeah, but we can't move on to that brighter future unless we acknowledge what's been lost along the way. And we're not going to go back to a new normal. We're not going to go back to the old normal. There's never a going back to the way things were, ever. For any of us, there's never a going back to the way things were. There's only moving forward to a new normal that integrates our past in a way that either we get to choose brings us down or elevates us. So we integrate that, but first we need to grieve what's been lost. And so it mentions specifically that before the Pandavas were able to move forward into a new future, they needed to lament what had been lost. And so grieving in a spiritual context is not pretending that things don't matter. It's not pretending that things never happened. It's not diminishing things and saying they're not that big of a deal. But it's allowing ourselves space to grieve, but with the concept and the mentality that I need to move beyond it. That ultimately I am more than this. Ultimately, my true self is beyond the circumstances that are taking place here. So I don't want to get stuck in it, but I don't want to leapfrog over it also. And that's the spiritual dance. That's the spiritual maturity it really takes to navigate challenging situations, whether it's you're mentioning with your parents, or whether it's just relationships at work or whatever, or losses or grieving. How do I allow this space to be acknowledged and felt, and at the same so that I could move past it? Because I am more than this. I know that. I am more than this, and I know that. And so Radhanath Swami has this beautiful, beautiful section about navigating spiritual relationships, daily challenges with friends. And he has how to support a healthy spiritual community. And we're already out of time, though. We're at 9:26. Martha says, yes, but mind, time, and illusion play tricks on us. Very true. Very, 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 very true. And so if anybody here in our chat has any takeaways they want to share, please feel free to have them here. We don't have Kimberly here, as you normally are takeawayer. But my takeaway, what I'm pulling away from is when something's bothering me, when something feels that I am in a place of experiencing embarrassment or shame or loss or pain, giving myself the time to sort of separate myself from it enough to recognize that this shame, this pain, this sense of loss doesn't belong to my soul. It belongs to the ego identity that I've built in this life, and that's okay. I may still feel it. I may still need to experience it. I may need to move through it, but it belongs to the ego identity that I've built in this life, or that has been given to me outside of myself. Some of the comments mentioning Vidya, I'm not this identity that I have in this material world. Dana, feel it, but know that I am more than this. Sydney, to allow ourselves to go through and grow through it, but not stay there in it. Powerful, 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 beautiful points. And a reflection exercise for you, if you're listening, is just a huge spiritual exercise is just asking ourselves, like, what are the ego identities that I'm carrying? And again, not using ego as like a 3-letter curse word. Like, oh, you got ego, you're so proud. But just ego just being like, what are all the identities that I've taken on? What are all the identities that I've taken on? And starting there and just acknowledging, not even thinking like I need to get rid of them, but just acknowledging like, yep, just to know what you're carrying around in your pocket. Just to know what you're carrying around in your backpack. Just so that you know what's there. Anna said the God-shaped hole in the heart. Thank you for bringing that up. So those are some of my takeaways. Those are my reminders for us today. I hope there's something in there that you guys can chew on, reflect on, give yourself some space to talk about with a friend. I love you all very much. I'm super, super glad and grateful that you guys are here. If you like something that you heard today, bring it with a friend, bring it up to a friend, share it with somebody, invite them onto the podcast, let people know what you're experiencing. And if you want to reach out to me ever you can, reach out to us here at the Bhakti Center. We'd love to hear from you. And if you want to check out anything else we got going on, bhakticenter.org, we got all kinds of cool things going on. And we will be back tomorrow, same time, same place. We look forward to being with you. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.